In both the original and remake versions of Silent Hill 2, there are 12 sections James needs to pass through in order to reunite with his long-lost wife, Mary. However, as any good remake should, Silent Hill 2 2024 remakes everything. And we're not just talking about the graphics and the world. Whole sections of the game are different. Characters take on slightly different personalities, and overall, the trials and tribulations of each James differs enough to ask the question, which one will leave Silent Hill more traumatized? Now, major story spoilers for the original and remake of Silent Hill 2. If you care at all about experiencing this game for yourself, do not watch this video. This is your last warning. Now, before we actually dive into the games, we need to have a look at our protagonists, James Sunderland and James Sunderland. Now, despite these two sharing a name, a character design, and a backstory, due to gameplay and story reasons, they are actually quite different, which I believe changes how both of them would experience and perceive Silent Hill. So starting with OG James, this guy comes out of the gate swinging. In the original, he's portrayed as having a brooding exterior, and the horrors of Silent Hill 2 don't get to him as much as in the remake. This James also takes matters into his own hands a lot more, seeming slightly more confident than his newer counterpart. This also doesn't change in the gameplay department, since James OG plays like a tank. And I know what you're thinking. You're going, Brandos, Silent Hill 2 has tank controls. Of course he moves like a fucking tank. Listen, James is like a tank, not just because he moves like one, but because in combat, he will often tank a hit from an enemy rather than dodge it. Really, this guy prefers to beat down on something till it stops moving than running away. He also doesn't get hurt quite as much as his 2024 counterpart, and rarely shows in his movement if he's physically injured. This James, however, is not too agile, as sprinting gives him a big burst of speed which quickly wears out. And if you push him too hard too long, he'll need to catch his breath. James Remake, on the other hand, is a little different though. On the personality side, he's a little bit more timid and obviously depressed, often struggling just to press onwards in the campaign. His personality is also very repressed, as it seems this James spends a lot of time disassociating. On the combat side though, James Remake is, if anything, more skilled than his predecessor, being able to dodge threats and use a variety of melee attacks to disable his enemies. This James is overall a lot more vicious in his attack style, but is also a lot more vulnerable, as the more James Make gets injured, the more his movement is impeded, with him slowly becoming less reliable when asking him to run in a straight line. In the end, it's clear that this version of James is running almost exclusively on adrenaline, while it seems the original is not quite as scared. Okay, so that's our backgrounds done. Let's talk hard stats. On the pros side, OG James enters Silent Hill with a more level head. I mean, he is looking for his dead wife in an abandoned town, but who hasn't done that? Come on, normal person shit. But he also boasts a higher pain tolerance, allowing him to take injury after injury until he finally drops. However, all is not perfect for the original, since in the cons department, we can list James as being a little bit slow. Just because you can take a hit doesn't mean you should, and James's inability to dodge enemies in fights will come back to bite him while in the town. James also lacks the stamina to safely traverse Silent Hill, as using too much sprint could get him stuck in a fight. Really, OG James is a balanced man. All the good things you can say about him are cancelled out by all the bad things you can say about him. Moving on to Remake James though, this man is nearly the opposite of his predecessor. Talking pros, James will have no problem traversing fights as well as fleeing them, since his speed grants him more agency in a combat encounter. His unlimited stamina also makes it possible to quickly exit a fight and outrun his attacker. Unfortunately, fleeing may be the norm for this James, as he is more prone to injury, but the element that may trip him up the most in Silent Hill is his fragile mental state. This James is more along for the ride than the original, and instead of making logical decisions on his next moves, Remake will usually follow strangers, take suggestions on Mary's location, and honestly just fuck around a lot more. This will lead to Remake James staying in Silent Hill longer than the original, possibly increasing the amount of traumatic things that could happen to him, as well as setting him up for more encounters with monsters. So the two men are set. Who will make it out of Silent Hill less traumatized? James Remake, James OG, or me? Yeah, I'm playing today too. So I thought it'd be kind of nice to get all immersed in the Silent Hill vibe. So I've gone ahead and I've bought a couple of custom candles off of Etsy that are all themed after Silent Hill. So we're gonna light them all up and we're gonna see if I can make it through this video without fucking vomiting, because what's more entertaining than watching a YouTuber suffer? So first up, we have Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head smells a bit like a really nice cologne. Okay, let's create a fire hazard. Okay, next up we have Fog World. Oh, this smells like an industrial district. All right, I don't know how else to explain that, but it does. We're getting serious with this one. Going to the Otherworld. Oh, that's so rich, dude. It smells like a chlorine pool or something. All right, finally, my absolute favorite one, just because of the name, we've got Silent Streets. That one's like it's kind of like the Fog World, but it's got a bit of like vanilla in it. This is what the cafe from Silent Hill 1 would smell like. Okay, so now my room's in the vibe. It smells like Silent Hill. It looks like I'm about to do a human sacrifice in here. We are ready to get into the challenge. So, James versus James. Who will win? So to get started, our competitors begin in section 1 on the roadside rest stop. There's not too much to say about this area. Both James stop to have a think about what Mary could mean by saying she's in their special place, but only OG James makes the connection that she would be talking about the park on the lake. This actually cuts quite a chunk out of his journey, setting OG James one step ahead. Moving through the forest though, I'll say that the original has a more disturbing ambience, as there's moments where you're not really sure what you're looking at. Pressing onwards, however, original James has his first encounter with a monster called the Lying Figure, except he has this encounter before he even enters the town, while Remake James passes by that exact spot, only encountering his first figure pretty deep into Silent Hill. Both men go for a nearby plank of wood for a weapon, and after defeating the figure, both of them have a pretty subdued response to the situation.
Whatever it is, it's not human.
What the hell is it?
It's obviously going to take a little more to rattle these guys. And more is what they end up getting, since after this encounter, the streets of both Silent Hills are flooded with lying figures. This is where the two games split, however, since original James has already deduced that Mary could be in the park. All he needs to do is find a way there, while Remake James still has some more stuff to do in South Vale. Now this is where I'm going to introduce another little feature of the video, which is the Scarometer. This is a scale to track how much each level affects each James. It works on a scale of 10 points, and each level starts off at 2. If good things happen to James during a level, like his search for Mary progresses, or he meets a friendly person, 1 point will be deducted from the Scarometer. However, terrifying, scary, or traumatic things happening will also add points to the meter, depending on its severity. And at the end of the video, we will rack up all these scores and see which James is more traumatized. Now, earlier in the level, both James ran into a woman named Angela, who seemed a little bit confused, but was able to point us in the right direction. This sets both of our James down to a 1 on the Scarometer, and with James OG easily making it to the apartment block, he ends his level with a nice 1. James Remake, however, is getting an extra point added on, since he has to stay out in South Vale longer, bumping him up to a 2. Now, during this little puzzle section, James has to reassemble an old record and fix a record player, which in the process includes him having to reach his hand into this hole. Also, if you play this game with a PlayStation controller, you can actually feel the texture of whatever James is touching. It's so fucking gross. So he gets another Scarometer point added. But upon doing the puzzle, the record player plays a song that reminds James about the park on the lake. This progresses James's search for Mary and provides him with a good memory, so I'm deducting 1 Scarometer point. But, oh, I'm actually gonna re-add that point, because directly after that scene, James finds a key to the Woodside apartment and instantly gets jumped by 3 lying figures. The weather in Silent Hill also goes haywire, forcing him to sprint to the apartment block. So with the level complete for both men, currently James OG is happy sitting on 1 Scarometer point, while Remake had a rougher introduction to Silent Hill, propping him up to 3 Scarometer points. But don't worry, original James isn't going to get off easy, as entering the apartments, both James have to complete essentially the same puzzle. And during it, I will say that OG James gets the short end end of the stick. In the remake, completing puzzles usually loops you back around to the main area, but in the original, James has to backtrack through the same hallways multiple times. And while the cramped rooms aren't really a problem for Remake James and his ability to dodge, OG James can easily be snuck up on and ambushed here, so I'll be adding 1 point to OG's Scarometer. While searching the block though, both James meet Laura, who stamps on his hand, but I won't give or take any points here because she's not friendly, but she's also not like a traumatic incident. But what is traumatic? Well, definitely meeting Pyramid Head. As walking through the block, we come to a fence with the big bad standing behind it. And I'm adding 1 Scarometer point for both James here because while they don't actually have a reaction to them, that might be the most telling thing here. As I believe on a subconscious level, James 100% knows what Pyramid Head is, and every time he shows up, it's another knock on the door of James's repressed memories. So OG goes up to 4 and Remake goes up to 3. After this moment though, the game splits once again as Remake James finds a pistol, which by the way, OG James finds a lot sooner. What OG instead finds in this room is a lovely hole to stick his arm inside of. 1 point. Now this is where things get a little bit out of order. In the remake, James enters an apartment and meets Eddie, a dude who seems like he's got something to hide, but he's friendly enough. Now in the original, James meets Pyramid Head first, and I think it's important to do the meeting scenes at the same time since it clearly shows off the difference between our two protagonists. So meeting Pyramid Head in the original, I'm gonna say it's not as scary as in the remake. Since here we simply walk into an apartment where Pyramid Head just like happens to be getting his freak on. Also, I find it really funny that in this cutscene, James just confidently strolls in and this goes like, oh shit. Like what were you expecting? We're in Silent Hill. When is there ever a situation where you should be walking through a door like... In the remake though, James is already in the room when Pyramid Head suddenly appears, and unlike original James, he has no option but to hide in this closet. Back in the original, James takes the initiative as he's about to be discovered, grabs some bullets, and unloads them into Pyramid Head. This actually gets him to piss off, and I would probably say it saved his life. In the remake, James only fires as an absolute last resort, and the bullets don't hurt Pyramid Head nearly as much, with James' remake apparently only surviving due to Pyramid Head's mercy, or maybe even disinterest. Overall, with both of these guys meeting Pyramid Head, each gets 1 Scarometer point. However, OG James definitely came out of the situation less shaken up, since his survival was due to quick thinking rather than dumb luck, meaning OG gets no extra points while Remake gets 2. And considering that OG meets Eddie before the end of the level, we'll deduct 1 point from OG. Anyways, ending the level by stepping between the 2 apartment buildings, both our protagonists are sitting on 5 Scarometer points. So yeah, it wasn't a good time for anybody, but OG still walks away a little bit happier with an overall score of 6, while Remake is still in the lead for suffering at 8 points. Which leads us to the Blue Creek Apartments. Now the interesting thing here is that Remake James cannot leave once he's stepped through, while OG absolutely can, adding 2 points to the remake's tally. And you might be thinking, 2 points? Why? Well, by crossing between buildings, we actually crossed between the Fog World and the Otherworld, which in my opinion warrants 1 point. Nobody should be able to enter the Otherworld and come out okay, which is why I'll also add 1 point to the OG's count as well. Now, while in the Otherworld, shit is fucked up. In the remake, we run into an upgraded form of the Lying Figure, which is way tougher. However, I won't add on any Scarometer points because Remake James is well versed in combat, so fighting tons of enemies isn't too much of a problem for him. But I will be adding 1 Scarometer point onto the remake since he has to put his hand into a clogged toilet to continue. Like, ew! James Mary isn't in there. By the way, I won't be adding points for every single hole James sticks his fucking arm inside of. You know, as they say, the more you do something, the less scary it is. And I also don't want to comb through 20 hours of footage to find every single hole James decides to shove his entire arm inside of. Now, on the toilet thing, in the OG, you could totally stick your hand in one if you want to, but this is for an optional puzzle. You don't actually have to do it. While Remake James actually does. So Remake is getting another point. And if we're in the mood to be handing out points, let's talk about how we meet up with Angela again. This isn't a story breakdown, so the conversation doesn't matter, but meeting a friendly human is an automatic 1-point deduction, leaving OG with 2 points and Remake with 4. And yes, it's starting to look like Remake James is getting the short end of the stick, but I want to point out something. OG James experiences a lower baseline of scary stuff happening constantly as opposed to the Remake. In the Remake, there's a lot of gross, scary stuff happening a lot of the time, which in this experiment is consistently building up his points. But as we're about to find out, OG's moments of elevated horror go far beyond what the player's used to. Look, here's a graph if you don't get it. But if you played Silent Hill 2, you'll know that I am leading into talking about the Pyramid Head boss fight. And yeah, the way these two fights go down is drastically different. In the Remake, there's a lot of empty rooms leading up to the fight, and you can just tell something is cooking. Entering a room, we see Pyramid Head standing there, and then we spend the next few minutes sprinting around this room, shooting at Pyramid Head as he destroys stuff. It's a pretty by-the-numbers fight, and I know this is like blasphemy to say about a horror game, but like this fight made me feel kind of badass, you know? Like I've pummeled my way through nearly 100 monsters right now. I'm feeling pretty unstoppable. There's also the fact the arena just slowly crumbles and shakes the more we fight. It feels like we're two titans clashing. So that's to say that the fight really isn't much more stressful than the other situations we've been in, which means James Remake gets 1 point for meeting Pyramid Head and another point for the boss fight. OG, on the other hand, isn't having as great a time though, as walking through this random door, we once again find Pyramid Head getting his freak on. I also like that this is the second time James has confidently strolled into a room, seen Pyramid Head and gone like, holy shit, dude. You know that Pyramid Head is in the building with you. Why are you so surprised when you keep running into him? Anyway, so James goes to leave only to find the door is locked and we enter the Pyramid Head boss fight in a stairwell. This is probably the wildest thing about the OG. The devs don't give a fuck where big boss fights go down because Silent Hill isn't a place that makes things easy for you. So this fight is intense. You can pretty much only run from one corner to the other. It got my hands sweating a little bit. So yeah, OG's boss fight takes the cake for being more traumatic, and I'll be awarding James 6 scarometer points for this fight. 1 for meeting Pyramid Head, 1 for accidentally walking in on Pyramid Head, 1 for having the door instantly locked behind him, 1 for the tiny arena, and you know, just 1 more for good measure because you're locked in a stairwell with Pyramid Head. This boss fight really clutches the score for OG, putting him at 8 points. I don't think bro is ever going to be taking the stairs again after this. So finally, after a little back and forth, a tornado siren sounds and Mr. Head exits the fight. Following him out though, we've made it through the apartments, and that whole section has actually evened out both of our protagonists' total scores, with both of them scoring a 14 on the scarometer. So while these areas affected both men in very different ways, the terror both have felt has been quite equal. By the way, if any of you are worried about the legitimacy of my results, I will say that I did not pick the victor of this challenge before I wrote the script. I literally took the numbers model of the scarometer, I ran through the whole campaign, and then I calculated who was the winner. So don't worry, I'm not pulling your leg, I'm not trying to be dramatic or anything. They are literally tied right now because the scarometer says so. So heading out into the silentest of hills, both of our James run into a kid named Laura, -1 point. Who knows who Mary is? And heading into the lakeside park, we find Maria. Yeah, so this is Maria, not Mary. She just looks like Mary down to her voice, but she's not her.
Do I look like your girlfriend?
Obviously, just another element of Silent Hill fucking with James. Now, part of me wants to give out a scarometer point to both James here. Like, I know with the rules, James is meant to get a scarometer point deducted since he met a human, but I don't know. This situation is just kind of fucked up. Like, you got to put yourself in James's situation and think about how a normal person would be processing all this information. On OG James's side, I'm going to say he doesn't get a point. Apart from being a bit stunned that Maria looks like Mary, he kind of just instantly shifts his goals back to finding the real Mary, and Maria becomes a bit of an afterthought to him.
You're coming with me?
You were gonna just leave me?
So he's disturbed by Maria, but still has a direction to go in. So he doesn't get a point on the scarometer, but he also doesn't get one deducted because Maria is not a very soothing person. James Remake, on the other hand, has a bit more of a reaction to her, and the guy starts disassociating so hard I could swear his brain is taking damage. So I'm going to give him 2 scarometer points to make up literally every conversation he has with Maria in the game, because every time she opens her mouth, you could just see bro mentally check out. It's obviously hitting him hard enough to the point where he can't really process it. So this puts on 3 points for Remake and 1 point for OG, and this is where things are going to get really interesting because the 2 games split dramatically here. The split really occurs when Maria asks if James and Mary had another special place. In the original, James remembers that the hotel was another area of significance, but in the remake, James doesn't quite remember. Maria then volunteers him to show some places she thinks could be considered special, and they head out. Now, between the 2 pairs, OG definitely has an easier time since he already knows where he's going and simply has to move past a few obstacles to get there. This eventually leads him and Maria to a bowling alley where they run into Eddie and Laura again. And with Laura running away to Brookhaven Hospital, the level ends with OG James accruing no new points for the scarometer. This level is one of OG's least stressful in the game, which is kind of funny because it is one of the remake's most stressful ones. As back on the remake, first Maria leads James to a hotel, which is not his special place. That's 1 scarometer point for a dead end in James's search. And moving on, Silent Hill suddenly throws an onslaught of monsters at the duo. Now, the original never does anything like this, so I'll give James Remake 2 points on the scarometer, but instantly deduct 1 since he gets an upgraded melee weapon. In the original, you could get your hands on this pipe, but it was an optional thing, so I'll give this small gift from Silent Hill a point deduction. After this, James and Maria make it to Heaven's Nights, a strip club that Maria worked at, and in classic Maria fashion, she starts fucking with James again.
Is this a special place you met?
Don't be silly.
So yeah, 1 extra point for another dead end. But after leaving Heaven's Nights, Maria leads us to a park she considers a special place. And at this point, James is kind of fed up with this and he's like, Maria, you're full of shit.
She's not here. And why would she be? I don't even remember this place.
Another point for a dead end. Luckily, the 2 hear a nearby scream and going to investigate, they find both Eddie and Laura in a movie theater. And talking to Eddie, I'm going to add 1 extra point to that scarometer just because of the way he's eating that ice cream like... Ew, bro! Like, bro's getting his sweaty ass hand, putting it in a bucket of melted ice cream and just...
Eddie?
I see that you didn't make it out yet. Well, at least you got your appetite back. You coming? Never mind.
Eddie deserved to be bullied. But James Remake ends up chasing Laura again, and the 2 eventually end up at the hospital where we finally catch up to James OG. And man... this level was rough for James Remake. OG ends this level with 0 points, while Remake ends the level with a total of 7 points. This leaves OG's total at 14 points, while Remake zooms ahead to 21 points. So moving on to Brookhaven Hospital, this is one of Silent Hill 2's most popular levels, since it introduces the nurse, and it's also very scary. Now, I'm already going to give OG a point, since as we've seen, that game has a much more oppressive atmosphere when we head indoors. It's also near pitch black in the hospital, so it's more terrifying. Now, this part is essentially one massive puzzle, so there's not a lot to talk about if we're speaking on traumatic experiences, but there are a few moments. Like, for instance, when you get to the roof for the first time, Pyramid Head jump scares both Remake and OG James. So obviously both of these guys get 1 point for a Pyramid Head encounter, but the real challenge comes from figuring out who took worse of a fall? Because on one hand, Remake James got thrown through 2 doors and a floor, but OG literally fell down the side of the hospital. You know, he got real airtime, and then he fell through the roof. So I don't know. I think OG took a worse beating. Also, the OG jump scare is scarier too, since at this point, you know Pyramid Head's movement noise off by heart. So I'll give OG 2 points and Remake 1 extra point, doubling each figure. Later on though, both James run into Laura again, where we get another taste of the man's stunning social skills.
Why can't you just tell me?
You gonna yell at me if I don't?
No. Stop lying.
You gonna yell at me if I don't?
No, I won't.
We met at the hospital. It was last year.
You liar!
But yeah, Laura says she has a letter from Mary that she hid in a nearby room, but this is a lie, and both James are locked inside, being confronted by our next boss fight, the Fleshlip. Now, like the Pyramid Head boss fight, I'll say it right out of the gate, OG James has it worse. Remake's Fleshlip has a bigger arena, and the more you fight it, the more it turns into a traditional boss fight, sprouting arms and chasing you around. So obviously it's scary, but with the slightly better situation, James Remake only gets 2 scarometer points here. OG, on the other hand, gets a beating. And do you want to know why? Watch 10 seconds of this fight. OG James is pretty much locked in a broom closet with not just 1 Fleshlip, not just 2 Fleshlips, but 3 of them. It's crazy. I love how Silent Hill 2 does this. There's no real build up to the fight. There's no grand arena. You're just locked in a room with a monster that's beefier than usual. And this boss fight actually took me quite a while to beat, since the Fleshlips are such bullet sponges. So I'll be giving James OG 3 scarometer points for this fight. After beating all of them though, the Otherworld sirens go off and James passes out, ending the level. On the Remake side, James also beats the Fleshlip, but is ambushed by another one, getting dragged through the ceiling. Which, you know what? I'll give this moment a scarometer point, because it is scary. But Remake's experience was nowhere near OG's. This ends the level with one of OG's highest scarometer counts yet, coming in with a score of 9, while the Remake enjoys a slightly less scary experience with a score of 6. This leaves the OG on a total score of 23, while the Remake still holds a narrow lead of 27. Waking up in the Otherworld though, both James instantly get 1 point just for fucking being there. And I'll give the OG an extra point for just how oppressive the atmosphere is. But honestly, this bit is once again a long puzzle with not too many moments of unique horror stuff happening. So I'll just be skipping to the end of the level where we meet up with Maria again and go to exit the hospital. But Pyramid Head has other plans, and in both versions he pursues us through the basement until we arrive at an elevator. Sadly, only James makes it inside, trapping Maria with Pyramid Head, which goes just about as you would expect. And I gotta say, OG takes the cake on this scene, because I don't know, I think that the Remake is missing something. I would say that the entire pursuit feels pretty clunky, and then you just have that moment where James and Maria are trying to open the elevator door, and it's not really scary, it's just kind of awkward. But in the OG, Maria is fucking screaming, dude. The whole cutscene feels frantic and hopeless. But look, Maria still did die right in front of James Remake, so he gets a 4 on the scarometer, while James OG gets a 6, because I feel like he gave a bit more of a shit, so it hits him harder. This ends the level, as well as our time in the hospital, with OG gaining 10 scarometer points and Remake getting 7, making this once again OG's highest scarometer level and landing him close to the lead with a total of 33 points, while Remake just barely holds on with a total of of 34. So seeing Laura run away from the hospital, the next level up is once again South Vale, but it's dark now. But this level is again a bit of a filler section where you find a key that unlocks a key that unlocks a key, you know what I mean? And yeah, I totally get it. The player does need some downtime after such big plot developments. So the only thing I really have to judge is how scary the ambience in this section is, which will go to the remake. While the OG definitely has the silent and scary part down pat, I think the remake does a better job at creating a story-fitting mood. Like after this section, the streets are just packed with enemies. There's rain pouring. It's awesome and pretty tense. So the remake will get 1 extra point on the scarometer. Now after this remake, James spends a little longer roaming around outside than OG, but in the end, both of them end up at the Silent Hill Historical Society. And once inside, both of them make the dumbass decision of just jumping down this random hole they find. So yeah, both of these dumbasses get 2 points. A little later though, we run into Eddie again, who is mysteriously hanging out near a dead body. I'm not going to redact any points here either because he is not a comforting presence. The remake will in fact get 1 scarometer point though, since in the original, Eddie seems more out of it than, I don't know, murderous. But in the remake, it's literally he's waiting for James to say the wrong thing so he can shoot him. The two Sunderlands then work about making it through Toluca Prison, which is some sort of underground hellhole of a jail, and the original once again dominates in the atmosphere. Light sources are non-existent, the ambience is disturbing, and it just feels like everything is covered in a layer of grime. The remake's prison level is still good, but it's lacking that little extra bit of, I don't know, rust. So 1 point to the OG. What really changes between two experiences next though is when we arrive at the Labyrinth. And in the OG, we run into Maria, who's still apparently alive, but it's quickly revealed that she's something else entirely, talking as if she were both Mary and Maria, or even none of them.
Aren't you Maria?
I'm not your Mary.
So James makes his way through the labyrinth to reach Maria, and on his way, he runs into Angela again, who's being attacked by something called the Abstract Daddy. But killing it, James will once again get no points for meeting another human being because Angela is less than friendly.
You make me sick.
The icing on the cake comes when we finally reach Maria and find that she's once again just as dead as she was at the hospital. On the remake side, things happen way differently, as we are stalked and chased through the labyrinth by the Abstract Daddy, and now have to fight it in a full-blown boss fight. We then do the whole meet Maria and lose Maria thing again, and the level comes to a close for both men when we run into Eddie, who's gone full-blown nuts, killing everyone who comes across. This leads us into a boss fight with him, and once we kill the Edster, the Jameses head outside to the next level. Oh boy, what a level. I haven't been keeping scarometer count on this one till the end, just because Silent Hill is out for blood during this part. First up, neither James gets any point reductions from meeting any humans here because all of them are just so off. As for the Maria stuff, on initial meeting, both James will get a scarometer point for general Silent Hill shenanigans, but once we find her dead, I'll actually just give the original 5 points for this, since he seems very torn up. While over in the remake, the facial expressions we see James make tells me that this is where he realizes that Silent Hill might be manipulating him, because you can see him go, wait, why am I mourning Maria? She's possibly not even actually Maria, and Mary is still out there. So OG's going to get 5 scarometer points, while Remake will just get 3. Remake does catch up considerably for the Abstract Daddy boss fight though, as the Abstract has an entire sequence rather than it just being a single room. The original Abstract Daddy also becomes a pretty common enemy after this point, so it's even less scary in the original. Overall, OG gets 1 point, Remake gets 3. Finally, for the Eddie stuff, once we've killed him, OG James is horrified about what he's done. While over in the remake, it's a little bit more nuanced. There's no real dialogue here or anything, but James just seems more confused than anything. It's like he knows that he's actually killed someone before. So the OG gets a 2, while the remake gets a 1. And that means we end the level with our highest scores yet, with OG James sitting at a 10 on the scarometer, and Remake is sitting right next to him with a 10 as well. Both of these guys are definitely going to be haunted by the events of this level, which is more than I can say for the next one, as entering Toluca Lake, our two James simply have to row towards the distant light. And it's so relaxing that I will redact 1 point from each scarometer. Finally reaching the Lakeview Hotel though, we run into Laura again, who actually gives us a letter from Mary. This is the first time in ages a human has actually deducted a point for us. And through the level, we run around the hotel attempting to access our old room. The funny bit here is that the remake almost eases up for us, and the area is mostly well lit, as well as not completely crawling with monsters, while the OG is just a lot of... Finally reaching our hotel room though, we don't end up finding Mary, but instead a VHS player, which we can use to view a tape we picked up earlier. And what we end up seeing is quite revealing of our situation.
Promise you'll take me again, James? Please promise you'll take me again, James?
So we find out that James killed his wife. She's not in Silent Hill, and she also didn't die from a disease. She was smothered by James after he couldn't bear to take care of her anymore. As for which tape I find more disturbing, it's a very mixed bag. The original glitches into this silent movie where we see James kiss Mary, then smother her. After this, we see scattered images of moving and thrashing intercut with Mary from a time when things were better. On the remake side, it's very similar, except the tape is much more corrupted looking and the audio is no longer silent, but it sounds just as corrupted as the images we're looking at. In some ways, it feels like a blurred memory or something. The most effective thing for me here is this split-second shot where you can see Mary's wedding ring glistening on her hand as she fights back against her husband. I find it to be really disturbing imagery. But then again, I love the original's simplicity. No bells or whistles. Silent Hill is just saying, this is what you did, and you get to witness the memory very cleanly. But the remake is so effective too. You know what? All right, I'm just gonna say it. Both of these tapes are just as traumatic as each other. OG James is a lot more confident in the remake, so I think being confronted with his sins front and center would wound him a lot more than the remake's more nuanced cutscene. But that's not to say remake James isn't just as affected. Remake James is a lot more emotional than OG, and it seems to me that he already on some level knows what he did through the game. So this tape is just shoving that in his face and kind of forcing him to accept what he's done. Overall, both of these guys get an 8 on the scarometer, making this level a full-blown 10 for each of them. The final level begins once the Otherworld overtakes the hotel, and after exploring a little, we say farewell to Angela, who's decided to allow Silent Hill to overcome her, and a little later, both James enter an absolute nightmare blunt rotation consisting of 2 manifestations of his guilt and a woman that looks a lot like his dead wife. The 2 Pyramid Heads then kill Maria for the billionth time, and locking in, James decides to take the fight to the Head brothers, who end up finishing the job for him when they realize they can't guilt trip him anymore, because guilt tripping James Sunderland is now James Sunderland's job. Afterwards, we go and meet Mary outside, who actually just turns out to be Maria in disguise, and with James being sick of all of this shit, he rejects her, turning Maria into the final boss of the game. We then defeat her, and while there are multiple endings in both Silent Hill 2s, we'll be pretending that both James chose to leave the town. Oh, and if you're wondering, this entire level is a full-blown 10 for the scarometer. I mean, the amount of traumatic stuff that happens in the last 30 minutes is enough to make a guy swear off sleeping forever. But that is game! Both James spent more than their fair share of time running the Silent Hill gauntlet, but only one will leave slightly less emotionally scarred than the other. So without further ado, let's see what the scarometer says about our protagonists. All up, James OG has earned 69 scarometer points, while James Remake has acquired a close but still superior score of 71 points. This makes James Remake today's most traumatized protagonist. Now, this once again isn't to say the remake is more scary. In fact, if I'm being honest, the original game provides a more consistent tone, but the remake absolutely puts James through it. He has to deal with more monsters in the OG. Those monsters are also more dangerous and vicious. As well as that, he doesn't have quite as clear an idea on where to go as the original did, so the guy ends up spending a lot more time in the town than his PS2 colleague. The thing is that what inches the remake just above the OG is that the remake's challenges are a lot more physical than the OG. Remake James spends a lot of the game sprinting around, dodging, vaulting, climbing. He's got a lot more to do. The funny thing is that after this ruling and after all we've looked at, I would prefer to probably run through the remake Silent Hill campaign rather than the OGs. Just because the original is truly an unpredictable place. Like, sure, the remake is more physically demanding of James, but the OG doesn't care about how much space you have to move around. It doesn't care if its enemy placements are unfair. It truly feels like a hostile environment. And that is mostly true for the remake too, but James is more like John Wick, you know? He can handle a fight if it comes to it. So there's your answer. Both men suffered severely in the psychological department, but Remake's longer time spent in the town, as well as the challenges he faces, ensures that he will never forget this experience. Anyways, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Tell me in the comments which version of the Silent Hill campaign you would want to run through, and tell me which version of James you think suffered more. But yeah, I had a lot of fun making this video. It's been a long time coming. I wrote this video like ages ago, but I didn't get around to making it till now. I actually thought that these candles were gonna choke me out a lot more, but you know, it kind of just smells nice in here. Anyways, guys, thanks again for watching. I'll see you. Shit, that's my cue to get out of here. See ya.